Oaken by Robin K. Wallstrom. Dedicated for my daughter, Indy. Prologue. We were celebrating my grandparents tonight. They've been married 50 years. Mom cooked a lot of food, and Gram and Gramps were eating with us. We sat at the dinner table and thanked God for our food and for Gram and Gramps. I silently asked God if he would show me what I wanted to know so badly. I knew that God would, but it was hard for me to wait for an answer. I decided to ask my family what it was. Everyone had their own ideas. Mom said it's like playing catch. It works because both people are doing their part. It's like what honeybees are to pollination, a beautiful and necessary thing, Dad chimed in. It depends on and protects each other, Gramps said as he winked at Gram. Gramps added, it's like the elastic in your favorite pair of boxer shorts. You mean to say it gives? Grandma said with a laugh. My brother Robbie laughed and said that I'd probably never know what it was. Ugh, brothers. Psalm 27:14. Wait patiently for the Lord. Be brave and courageous. Yes, wait patiently for the Lord. Proverbs 18:24. There are friends who destroy each other, but a real friend sticks closer than a brother. 1 Thessalonians 5:11. So encourage each other and build each other up, just as you are already doing. Chapter 1. Prepping the soil. The morning started out all wrong. Dad was mad at me. I forgot about the wet cement he poured to lay a new sidewalk in our backyard. I ran out the door in a hurry to get to the tree. My shoe got stuck in that cement. Afterwards, I thought the sidewalk looked real interesting with my shoe size print in it. But Dad didn't. He rolled his eyes, groaned, and told me to go play in the front yard. The front yard was fancy, but not much fun. Nonetheless, that's where Dad said I needed to play. The front steps looked out over a large grassy boulevard where trees grew, mostly maple trees. Beyond the boulevard was the street. I wasn't allowed to cross. That street was a reminder that I was little and needed to grow older. I sat on those front steps bored. I sat on those steps waiting. I waited to grow older, waited for the cement to dry. I waited for something to do. At the tree, there was always things to do, but here in the front, it was different. I had to think of things to do. I waited with my hands curled around my eyes like binoculars. I hoped I would see something amazing, like a bald eagle or bird poop falling in midair. That would be cool. Bird poop falling on Robbie's head would be even better. I fixed my eyes, adjusting my pretend binoculars on the other side of the street. I wondered what was over there. After twisting my hands to ensure my binoculars were in focus, I saw a lady walking a dog. Then a girl came into view too. I wondered if that girl really wanted to be walking. I wondered if she were bored like me. I put my binocular hands in my pockets and decided to slyly make my way across the boulevard. I darted from tree to tree, hiding and peeking behind each tree. I wanted to stay hidden until I was closer to the curb. The last tree was planted right by the curb. I ran to it, poked my head around the tree. I became nervous when the girl saw me. Reluctantly, I waved the hand that I used for binoculars at her. She waved back at me. I was sure that this was a sign that my luck was turning around. Instantly, I decided that I wasn't going to let a little wet cement ruin my whole day. I remembered that Dad hadn't said exactly where I could play in the front yard. Besides, Mom says I'm growing by the minute. I convinced myself that I was old enough to cross that street. I stood on the curb and thought about what people should be thinking about before crossing a street. When nothing important came to mind, I looked all around and decided to count how fast I could make it across. Wow! I made it in 3 Mississippi. She was taller than me, This girl had black, smooth hair combed in 2 pigtails. She looked at my hair, too, and smiled. I smiled in return. I noticed the lady who I assumed was her mom. She was being pulled by that big dog. The girl was standing on the sidewalk next to a pine tree. I picked up a soggy pine cone that was on the ground between us because I felt nervous inside, and I didn't know what to do next. I looked up at the girl and introduced myself. "Hi, my name's Oaken. I was named after the great big oak tree. I live in that brown house right there." I pointed to my house. I was amazed at how different my house looked from this side of the street. My eyes were locked on my house. I didn't want to forget where it was because, well, I needed to get back to that place. Then I realized that I had crossed the street and was safely on the other side. I had done it. I looked at the girl and confidently added, "Yep, that's my house, that one way over there on the other side of that street." I liked that girl right away. She didn't laugh at my name. She didn't ask me to repeat it either. She simply smiled. I asked her if she wanted to play. She looked toward her mother, who was now jogging to keep up with the dog that was pulling her in our direction. Her mom found us standing together on the sidewalk. I looked down at the soggy pine cone in my hand, and I remembered my dad explaining to me that pine cones held seeds which grew into enormous pine trees. Her mom asked where I lived and what my name was. She said that I had a very nice name. Instantly, I knew this girl had a good mom, too. I thought to myself, maybe her mom and my mom could be... Before I could finish that thought, I heard my mom shouting real loudly. My mom came running across the street. There's my mom. She's probably coming over to congratulate me. I'm crossing the street safely by myself," I nervously and unconvincingly said out loud. My mother's shout was not one of those good kinds, like those heard at a ball game during a grand slam, and it certainly wasn't one of congratulations. I was afraid that it wouldn't be long before this girl and her mom knew it too. My mom rushed across the street. Mom looked shocked, looked upset. She was talking real fast and frantic about how those cars could run me over. She made a zippy, fast arm motion and then splat. She mashed her hands together flat like a pancake, all the while yelling about fast cars and pancakes. I felt embarrassed and wanted to change into the pine cone that I was still holding. Trying to avoid Mom's downward jack-o'-lantern eyebrows, I stared at her hair. I tugged on her shirt, and I blurted out the first thing that came into my head. "Mom, this girl has a mom with hair too." Mom was stunned, completely dumbfounded. Then my mom looked at the girl's mom, shrugged her shoulders with an awkward little laugh. It was the same laugh she made when a man stopped us as we backed out of the grocery store parking lot to tell us that we left a 12-pack of toilet paper on the roof of our car. I knew Mom felt so embarrassed. Mom smiled fake and her cheeks looked pink. Mom looked right at me and she joked, "Oh, Oaken, we all have hair. Since you've taken such an interest in it, we can shampoo, condition, and comb your hair real smooth tonight. Yeah, we can make a whole evening out of playing beauty shop." Oh, nuts! Mom outsmarted me. My mom apologized to the girl and her mother for my behavior and greeted them politely. That's when I discovered her name. Her name was Gemma. I smiled because when you shorten that to Gem, it was the name for a really cool rock. And I really dug rocks. As it turned out, Gemma was my age. Our moms exchanged telephone numbers and we said our goodbyes. Mom and I crossed back over to our side of the street. Mom stopped and looked down at my feet. She noticed one of my shoes was missing. "Where is your shoe?" she asked. She sighed heavily when I didn't respond. I wished I had stepped into that cement with those shiny hand-me-down shoes my cousin Lily gave me. But I was thankful I hadn't blurted that out too. I sat on my bed and thought about what happened. Despite stepping in wet cement, ruining my tennis shoe, and having both my parents mad at me, I had met someone. Maybe that someone was going to be a friend. I pulled the pine cone out of my pocket, remembered what my dad said to me about how a little pine cone holds the promise of a giant new tree, and couldn't help but wonder if something was starting to grow. Exodus 20:12. Honor your father and mother, then you will live a long, full life in the land of the Lord your God is giving you. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. Chapter 2. Planting a Seed. I shared a room with my little sister Millie. My bed faced a large painting on the wall that my dad painted for me. Dad told me that a person has to have something that's all their own, something they didn't have to share if they didn't want to. It was a large painting of an oak tree. My eyes popped open to that beautiful oak tree every morning, and there it was this morning. I lay in my bed and remembered when we first moved here. I begged Dad to tell me all about the trees in our neighborhood. I remembered when he and I walked around our neighborhood and Dad pointed out the trees around our home. Dad knew I loved trees. The pine tree at the end of my alley was the tree that excited me the most. Dad told me that this pine tree was similar to the trees that lumberjacks used to cut down up north. Dad explained that the wood of this type of pine was valuable lumber. It was the kind of wood used for building homes and other important construction projects. The fact that one grew at the end of my alley meant it was special. It was tall and straight. It had a wide trunk. Its branches reached over the fence that bordered my neighbor's house and the alley. Lucky for me, my neighbor, Miss Grover, was real nice and allowed me to play under that tree in her yard any time I wanted. It was safe, too, because Mom could see me through the kitchen window. As I laid there thinking about that tree, I imagined big lumberjacks trying with all their strength to cut this pine tree down. I imagined its roots grew too deep and stretched too far for those woodsmen. Even though it wasn't an oak tree, I imagined that it grew here just for me, and I knew I needed her. I loved this tree. Everything about her made me smile. I admired her strength. Dad said it was a lot like me, so I figured it had to be a girl too. I couldn't wait to tell someone all about this special tree and show her to a real friend. I flung the covers off my body and ran downstairs. After begging Mom, she agreed to show me how to use the telephone. However, before we even touched the telephone, she talked and talked about phone manners. I took a deep breath and let it out because, I needed some new air. I hadn't even learned the old regular manners, and now there was a whole new set of manners to learn. We practiced phone manners on my pretend cell phone. Then Mom suggests that we call Graham and practice phone manners with her. Hooray! I love that idea. I knew Graham was an early riser like me. I dialed Graham's number, and it was ringing for the second time. I just couldn't believe it when Graham answered and began speaking. Graham and I talked for a while, but after what Graham called a delightful conversation, I used my best phone manners to say goodbye. Mom reminded me that I might want to call Gemma and ask her if she'd like to play. I was so excited to call Gem. Mom told me that her number was on a scrap of paper under the pizza delivery magnet on the refrigerator. Mom reminded me that her name was Gemma, not Gem. But I bet she'd love it if I called her Gem. After only one accidental call to a stranger, who, by the way, needed to learn phone manners too, I finally dialed the correct number. Her mom spoke friendly. "Hello? Is this Gem's house?" I asked. Oh, well, this is Gemma's mother. Is this Oaken? Her mother replied softly. Sure is. Bet you can't guess what I'm wearing. Wouldn't it be really cool if you could see me and I could see you through this telephone? Because guess what? I'm winking at you right now, I blurted out. Her mom asked, You're calling to speak with Gemma? Yep, I confirmed. Is it okay to call her Gem? I just love her name. I can play with her when you say goodbye to me and then I say goodbye to you, I said. Well, I'm sure she would like to play, but she's still in her pajamas, her mother said. Oh, I'd like to play with her at my favorite place called the tree. It's out my backyard across the alley. Besides, if she wore her pajamas, she wouldn't have to get dressed and it'd be a lot quicker, I said. Bye. Oh, one more thing. Thank you for letting your voice come through this telephono. That's Spanish for telephone. Thank you for not yelling about wrong numbers and sleeping. Should I thank you for anything else? I asked. There was silence, followed by laughter. Jem's mom told me that Gem would eat breakfast and get dressed and that she would walk Gemma over in 1 hour. Then she asked to speak to my mom. I didn't really know how long 1 hour was. I thought learning how to use the phone was enough learning for one day. Besides, it didn't matter. I'd be at the tree all hours of the day anyway. I was real proud of me because I said a lot of thank yous, and that's good regular manners and good phone manners. I dug down in my pants pocket to the sandy bottom and found the key, which I used in the pretend keyhole that I drew on the fence post where the tree lived. My dad gave me the key to play with, and I carried it with me like my big, strong name wherever I went. I ducked under its branches and found my homemade broom, which was made of a dead pine branch, taped to a wooden stick. I thought I'd sweep the dirt ground under the tree as I waited for Gem to come. Needles were everywhere. I loved pine needles, and I used them for all kinds of things. I used them for pretend campfires, for keys, beds for insects, and making secret potions. Although the needles were everywhere, the tree always seemed clean. I kept the tree clean because it was a special place to me. Mom would be so proud to see how clean I kept this tree. The tree was so beautiful and smelled real good too. Every time I came, I took big breaths under her. After all, she was giving me fresh and free oxygen. I figured if I breathed that oxygen in quickly enough, no one had time to pollute it. I just couldn't understand why anyone would want to pollute such a gift as this. It's so amazing that it's the very thing we need to breathe. I think that people forget how special oxygen is because it's invisible. Well, not me. I'd never forget how special oxygen is. I whispered a prayer. Thank you, God, for creating trees, especially this one. Hey, God, how did you decide that trees would give us oxygen? That's pretty great thinking. As I was breathing in all that pure oxygen and tidying up under the tree, along came Gem. She was shyly walking to the tree. She looked back over her shoulder at her mom and waved goodbye. My mom was standing there too, so I waved at my mom. Her mom and my mom chatted for a little while, and then I didn't notice the moms anymore. I was staring at Gem. Gem was so sparkly. Her hair was combed real nice with 2 purple bows and pigtails. She wore a purplish skirt with a white shirt. Something told me even her PJs would have looked sparkly. But what was sparkling the most were Gem's eyes when she looked up at the tree. I quickly pulled her hand and led her underneath its branches. I told her that this is a magical place that we get to play in. Gem giggled very excitedly, and I handed her a handmade broom too. The dirt dust just clung to Gem's very white tights as we swept. I wondered if Gem would be bothered by the dirt on her. But then I saw her do something cool. She snapped her tights and all the dust came off of them. She and I giggled when it made a little dust cloud around us. Gem, May I call you Jem instead of your long name? I asked. Sure, I like Jem, Jem replied. Jem and I swept under the tree, collected pine cones, pine needles, and played with stuffed animals underneath the tree. We fit under that tree perfectly. There was spare room for piggybacks, handstands, and a cartwheel. I think the tree grew like that so little people like us could play underneath it. We played at the tree all morning until Mom came. Mom agreed to walk Jem back across the street to her house and told me to come in for lunch. I didn't want Jem to leave. Bye, Jem, I sadly said. Jem sneezed loudly and said, Excuse me. A lot of dust, huh? I shouted. She just smiled, snapping her tights and waving goodbye to me. Walking in the house, I thought Jem remembered to say excuse me. She was a real pro at manners. Although I was getting to be a pro at some things, like using the telephone, I was still a little leaguer when it came to manners. I was happy that Jem liked being under the tree as much as I did. She liked dirt too, and everybody knows that dirt and fun go together, just like Jem and me. Psalm 104:16. The trees of the Lord are well cared for, the cedars of Lebanon that he planted. Luke 8:11. This is the meaning of the parable. The seed is God's word. Chapter 3. Weeds pop up. Jem and I loved that tree, and we enjoyed hanging out together. We took turns calling each other on the telephone, and our moms took turns walking us back and forth to the tree. It seemed we were together at the tree nearly every day. In fact, Mom finally resorted to bringing lunch out to Jem and me under the tree. She thought it was hopeless to try to get us inside to eat anymore. Mom's only fear was that a squirrel would come along sometime and eat us because we were a couple of real nature nuts. Mom set our lunch down under the tree. Before Mom left, she asked if we had seen the mail carrier yet. Mom knew that Jem and I knew all that happened around that tree. We noticed neighbors coming and going, observed animal tracks, and inspected seeds, fallen leaves, and branches. We noticed flowers that were in bloom, grass being mowed, neighbors watering and weeding, and people out and about. We also noticed that some things happened in patterns, like Mr. Temke. He had a pattern of looking in his mailbox twice when he checked his mail. We regularly heard Mrs. Barnum scolding her daycare kids for peeling the birch bark off her birch tree. My brother Robbie had a habit of starting the lawnmower on the third or fourth pull. If it took more than 4 pulls, Dad would shout from the garage, asking Robbie if he had checked the gas. Then we would see Robbie haul the mower back into the garage. There was one pattern, however, that really bothered me. It was a pattern that started this summer. My stomach ached inside just thinking about it. Or should I say, him. The pattern I didn't like was about a boy. He would ride past our tree. He would tease me. Whenever I saw him riding his bike, I tried to hide under the tree, although he always seemed to know I was there. As I thought of him, the feelings started bubbling up inside me like soda. I felt like I couldn't hold them in any longer. I had to tell someone before my stomach exploded. So I told Jem, I don't like that boy, I shouted out loud to Jem. What boy? Jem asked. You know, the one that rides by here in the afternoon just to bug us, I reminded Jem. He does? Jem asked surprisingly. Jem, yesterday after you left, he did it again. He's the meanest kid on earth, I said angrily. Jem looked confused. Oh, she replied unconvincingly. I wondered if Jem just agreed in an effort to stop me from getting mad. And I was mad at that boy, all right. I was mad at him for a lot of things. Just then, all the tears and the words came up like throw up during the flu season. I started to ramble. That boy chewed gum, and he blows bubbles bigger than his face, and that was no ordinary gum. I paused and thought about how that gum wasn't that fresh breath type that Grandma chewed. I was always disappointed in that gum. The bubbles never grew bigger than a bean seed. It figures that boy would chew better gum than me, too. I continued, what's worse is that I can't even see his face behind that bubble. He would blow a big bubble and then he'd ride fast. And when he passed me, he'd say what he always says. I was trying to stop the words racing out my mouth, but I couldn't. They were on their own bike ride right up my throat and out my lips. He rode a two-wheeler better than any kid I knew, and that makes me even more mad, I shouted. Jem had backed up a bit against the branches of the tree and finally said, Oak, you're mad at a boy for chewing gum and riding a bike? I didn't want to admit why I was so angry, but I finally burst. He teases me, Jem, I said at last, and the tears streamed down my cheek. He teases me. He rides by and he says, Oaken, Oaken, the lone oak tree. The words came out all jittery between the breaths and the sobs. Once I got all the words out, I felt like I had just thrown up for the last time on a flu-sick night and could go back to bed. However, it was too quiet after I stopped rambling and sobbing. Finally, I begged Jem to say something. I could tell it was awkward for Jem. I think I frightened her, but I hadn't meant to. I was about to duck out of the tree, run across the alley and into my house, but Jem reached for my arm. She said, Oak, the first time I met you, you told me that you were named after the big, strong oak tree, remember? You are big and strong, just like an oak tree. In fact, you're strong like this pine tree, too, Jem assured me. That boy doesn't know who you are. I don't think he knows much about trees either. Just like that, Jem was Pepto-Bismol for me. I lunged to hug Jem. I hugged her tightly. Finally, I let go of Jem and I apologized for shouting and getting so mad. I explained to her how this teasing made me all twitchy like a squirrel's tail and how badly it would hurt my stomach thinking about it. I told her that he would come by when I was alone under the tree and he would make fun of my name. Jem, do you think I am strong? Strong like an oak tree? I asked almost in a whisper. Jem laughed and she said, Oaken, you are so strong your muscles are popping out of your oak branches. Jem made a muscle arm pose and grunted like a muscle man. I smiled at the sight of Jem's pose and the sound she made. You really are a gemstone to me, I said. Proverbs 13:12. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a dream fulfilled is a tree of life. Proverbs 18:10. The name of the Lord is a strong fortress. The godly run to him and are safe. Chapter 4. Laying down the mulch. I'm a smart thinker, I told myself. I can add, subtract, and even multiply. Then I checked myself by going through multiplication facts up to 3. I can read chapter books, cross the street by myself, and I've learned to use the telephone. I know I could come up with a plan that would stop that boy from teasing me ever again. Yes, today I would stop his teasing, his bike riding, and his bubble blowing. I would trap that boy and make him spit out that gum. First, I'd ask him where he got that amazing gum. Then I'd make him stop riding by and teasing me. I needed Jem's help. But to Jem, that boy was like a plain bagel with nothing on it. Take it or leave it. Jem didn't get bothered very much over things. Her nerves seemed to be made of steel. In mine, well, they were made of aluminum foil. I just couldn't couldn't take that boy anymore. He was getting on my aluminum foil nerves. That boy had broken the rule of nature. Hurt no living thing. He hurt me all right with his words. I'd show him what kind of oak tree he was dealing with. I bet he didn't even know that the oak tree is one of the strongest and oldest trees on earth. I bet he doesn't know that the oak tree is so strong that it probably took 21 lumberjacks to cut one down, or 100 dads working really hard. He'll know this. Oak trees are strong, and I'd prove it to him what my name really meant. Here's the plan, Jem, I whispered in secret agent style. We'd lure him to the alley, and... Jem interrupted. We don't need to lure him here, Oak. You said he rides up here every day anyway. Oh, yeah, right, I remembered. That he did ride up the alley every day after lunch. He rides here past this tree? Jem asked. I was getting so frustrated with Jem, she kept interrupting the plan. In order for this plan to work, we had to stay focused and work together. This was my plan. I mean, our plan. We would gather all the pine needles that we saved and we'd collect extras just in case. We'd line them up across the alley. We'd stand them up straight using my little sister Millie's Play-Doh for the base. That enabled the pine needles to stand real tall. Then, when that boy would ride by, he'd pop both his tires on those strong, sharp pine needles. Pop! After his wheels popped and his bike would be out of control, we'd have him right there in the alley. He'd be laying there looking up at our big pine tree towering over him. Then we'd take him to the tree for questioning, like we do all serious matters of business. That was the plan. It seemed real smart. We needed to get started. We swept the dirt bottom floor of the tree base until our pockets were bulging with extra pine needles. We gathered some pine cones to use for ammunition. We would throw them at his bike just in case the pine needles weren't as sharp as we thought. Although I knew that the pine needles would work, we still needed the pine cones for an emergency situation. Come on, Jem. What's wrong? Why aren't you sweeping? I asked. Jem looked at me and she said, Why do you care about that boy and what he says anyway? He's just a boy with nothing to do. He makes you all mad and twitchy. I looked at her like I look at my mom's meatloaf when she tries to disguise it in a cute little bunny face so that I'll eat it. I said, Why would you say that, Jem? Does he ever call you Oaken the lone oak tree? Before she could answer, I answered for her. No, he doesn't. So you don't know how it feels. Besides, friends stick together like sap to a tree. That means what he's saying to me, he's also saying to you, right? Although I knew this wasn't true. I really wanted it to be. I couldn't understand Jem sometimes. How could Jem not see that this boy was a meanie? I had to remind Jem that not all boys are kind. I had to remind her of our strength and how we didn't stand for that kind of stuff. We gathered up those pine needles and laid them across the alley. I ran into the house to get my little sister Millie's Play-Doh, which was kind of hard, but it would work. We began setting up the pine needles. It took longer than I thought because Jem kept making little Play-Doh houses and using the pine needles for rooftops. I kept reminding her to stay focused on the plan. We had made a single row of pine needles nearly across the width of the alley. We were just about to the other side of the alley when I saw that boy coming. Jem and I dove into my neighbor's fake wishing well on the opposite side of the alley from the tree. I could see him coming, and he was riding fast, maybe even the fastest I've ever seen him ride. I suddenly doubted my plan and wondered if it was going to work. Would I be brave enough to question him? Then it happened. Whoosh! He rode past us. He rode past the pine needles and past all our hard work. I don't think he even saw those pine needles. I heard him tease, Oaken, the lone oak tree. He blew a giant-sized bubble and rode through those needles like a monster truck through the mud. Easily. His tires didn't pop. He did not lose control of his bike. He rode through speedy quick. That darn Play-Doh just stuck to his wheels, along with all our hard work and precious pine needles. Nuts! I shouted. When we realized that this was an emergency situation, we threw those pine cones at his bike. We were too late, and the pine cones just bounced into the little stream in the middle of the alley. Some even floated back to us like peaceful canoes. I shouted out loud, "Where is all this water coming from anyway?" Then I saw Robbie washing my dad's car while giggling and shaking his head at me. "Those pine cones were supposed to be warring missiles, not peaceful canoes," I yelled with my fisted hands. Oh, that made me mad. That boy was probably laughing at us right now. I wish that tree of ours would have uprooted itself and sprung up right in front of him. That would have scared him. Then I would have wrapped that boy in his own bubble gum so he couldn't move. But no such luck. Ugh. We returned to the tree and began sweeping underneath it again. I needed to think of a new plan of attack for tomorrow. Didn't seem like Jem was interested in the plan. It seemed like Jem didn't care about that boy or the fact that he teased me. After sweeping, I kicked off my shoes to empty all the pinchy things that stuck to my socks and laid there under our tree. Jem decided to take a break from sweeping too. We laid there underneath all those sheltering branches. I was so thankful for our tree. I needed a refill of oxygen. After 4 big breaths of pure oxygen, I felt calm again. Jem took off her socks to display a perfectly painted set of toenails. I looked at her and wondered how that must have tickled. Getting those painted. They were glittery. I quickly pinched my nose as if they stunk really badly and made a funny little grub face. Jem giggled. We both looked up through the tree branches and breathed the pure oxygen. "Breathe in, breathe fast," I whispered to Jem. "This tree is like us, huh, Jem? It's strong and smart." I was glad the tree was ours. I turned to Jem and said, "That boy would never be allowed under this tree, right, Jem?" Before Jem could reply, I spoke for her. Right. Proverbs 14:29. People with understanding control their anger. A hot temper shows great foolishness. Leviticus 19:18. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against a fellow Israelite, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Chapter 5. Quenched by the Rain. Today's rainy weather brought a new kind of adventure for Jem and me. Jem called me on the telephone and my brother Robbie answered. "Hello," my brother greeted. "Hello, Oaken, my mom," Jem said mistakenly in return. This is Robbie," Robbie interrupted. Oh, sorry. May I please speak with Oaken?" Jem asked. "Oaken! Jem's on the phone. Should I tell her you're rolling in the mud?" Robbie joked. "I'm coming," I yelled in return as I ran to the phone and grabbed it from my brother's hand. I held the telephone to my ear. "Hi, Jem," I said. "My mom says she'll take us to the dollar store if we would like to go with her," Jem said. Before long, we were on our way to the dollar store. Jem and I sat in the back of the van. That van was like a fort on wheels. It had a table and chairs that twirled in circles. Her mom waited for us to fasten our seatbelts before driving to the store. It was just 5 stoplights away. I knew the exact house where we needed to turn because it had a rainbow-colored hula hoop pressed up against the porch window. We had arrived at the dollar store. Inside the store, we headed straight to the dog treats. Jem loved to give treats to all sorts of animals, especially dogs. Although she had a real dog of her own, she had always dreamed of finding another. She wanted to keep a supply of dog treats at the tree in case a stray dog needed food. She said that we never knew when we were going to find a stray dog. The dog treats were on sale, 2 for $1. We loved the smell of those dog treats. They smelled like Robbie's salami sandwiches. Jem snuck a nibble of one of the dog biscuits. She insisted on sampling it first. She figured if people didn't like the taste of it, how the heck would a dog ever like it? Although I didn't think the store allowed customers to do that, Jem did have a very good point. So I sampled too. They were satisfactory, and we dropped them into her mom's shopping cart. Her mom smiled and tucked Jem's hair behind her ear as if she knew Jem was going to buy those. Next, we headed over to the toys, which usually were either princess crowns or camouflage squirt guns. Neither of these toys excited Jem or me. However, to our surprise, there were real scientific microscopes with lenses, little circular dishes, and tubes with corks on top. We looked at each other and we knew instantly that we had to have one of those. Jem's mom mentioned to us that the sign under the microscopes read, "Microscopes have only one magnification setting." She mumbled something about them being defective. Then she told us that we could each pick one thing that we could buy from the store. Jem's mom was so generous. Since Jem bought the dog treats, I bought the microscope with the chemistry set. In the van, we immediately opened it and counted the number of chemistry tools. This was gonna be an exciting day under the tree. We wanted to take a closer look at all the parts of the tree. The bark on the trunk, the pine needles, the pine cones, the branches, the roots, the sap, and all the cool bugs that we could find. We had done this countless times with our own eyes, but wow, even dirt looked cooler under a microscope. We were going to look at everything we could under that microscope. By the time we returned to Jem's house, the rain had stopped. We decided to go up to her room to find a special box to put all the chemistry tools in. We gave one of the dog treats to Jem's dog, and then we asked if we could go to the tree. Her mom had to walk us across the street to my side, which was the tree side. She'd done it 1,000,000 times, and besides, her mom was going to walk the dog anyway. I ran in the front door. Jem was behind me. I yelled to Mom that I was back and that I was going to play at the tree with Jem. Mom asked me to slow down and asked whether or not I thanked Jem's mom for taking us to the store. I stopped and paused to think a minute about that. Oh, nuts. I always forget about that kind of thank you, I thought. The kind when I'm all excited. That's a hard one to remember because you have to put up a stop sign to all that excitement. That kind of thank you is hard work, but I knew Mom was going to make sure that I thanked her. "I will, Mom," I promised, and then I ran out the back door. When we got to the tree, we swore the tree looked sad and droopy that we hadn't come first thing in the morning. It looked like an umbrella just waiting to open. It smelled just like always, real piney. It was dry under the tree. All the colors of the tree seemed darker after it rained. It looked beautiful to me always. Jem thought it looked especially beautiful today. Jem had a tender heart for living things, especially if she thought they were sad. We set up our microscope and chemistry set. "Hey, look at this!" I moved the microscope over to Jem so she could have a peek at the piece of bark I slid under the lens. Jem thought it was fun to see everything bigger than it actually was. After I looked at the sliver of bark, I put a pine needle under the scope. It looked bigger too. I tried to stuff a pine cone under that scope, but it was too chubby to fit. Then we took out those potion-like tubes and thought we could make pine potions with the sap and the needles. We gathered some rainwater at the end of the alley. The rain gathered in a hole that Dad always tried to avoid hitting with his car wheel. We added some pine cone scales and bits of pine needles to the potion. We put the cap on that little tube and shook it until it became cloudy. We kept a tin box hidden underneath the tree. We covered the tin box with a pile of rocks. In the box, we stored our favorite things. In it, we found our single jar of pickle juice, which was our favorite drink. We decided to put a little pickle juice into that potion. Pickle juice gave everything a little pizzazz. So we added it to our pine needle potion. I put the cork on it. "What should we call it, Jem?" I asked. "Well, let's sample it first," Jem suggested. "Okay, you first, Jem," I ordered. "Why should I go first?" Jem questioned. Okay, how about we each dip our pinkies in it, swirl it around, and lick it off our pinkies, I suggested. "Okay, a little pinky dirt never hurt," Jem said. We stuffed our pinkies in the tube, pulled them out, and licked the potion off. We made weird noises and made interesting faces. After our faces looked normal again, we declared it to be the best potion we had ever created. "Do you want some more, Oaken?" Jem asked. "Nope," I said real fast. "I mean, no thank you. I'd hate to waste it," I said, unwilling to admit the truth. "Potion this good needs to be saved for special occasions only," I added, hoping Jem would not ask again. We stored our potion in the tin box and covered it with rocks to keep it hidden. We decided to sweep the floor of our tree. "Hey, Jem, what if that potion turned into something overnight?" I asked. "Yeah, what if it could make us invisible or give us superpowers?" Jem wondered. That gave me an idea, and I paused and I looked at Jem with a smile. "What is it, Oak?" Jem asked. "By tomorrow, that potion will be super strength, and I'll use it to become invisible, and I'll trick that boy," I said excitedly. "What boy?" Jem asked forgetfully. I had to look at Jem with my bug eyes until she remembered what boy I was talking about. I imagined that pickle pine potion would work perfectly. Tomorrow after lunch, he'll ride up the alley, and I'll stop his bikes in his tracks. Wait. If I'm going to use the potion, I should probably cast some kind of spell," I said. I needed to think of a spell. After a few moments of thinking and rhyming to myself, I said, "Oh, I got it. Here it is. Stop, boy so mean. I'll lift you in your bike with my potion of green." "Get it, Jem? Get it? Pine and pickles are green," I added excitedly. "Then the spell is going to lift him up as high as our pine tree," I continued. Oaken, do you think the potion's really going to do all that?" "Will you remember that spell?" Jem asked as if it were as hard as learning telephone manners. I knew the potion had real potential, but the spell casting might be a little tricky. Then I thought of a brilliant idea. I said, "If I said the spell in another language, it would sound real mysterious and smart. You know, the way all foreign languages sound." Jem asked, "Do you know any other languages, Oaken?" "Well, my brother Robbie knows Spanish," I said excitedly. "Let's figure out what to say, then I'll ask Robbie how to say it." Then I thought of a great idea. "Why don't we make up words that mean something special only to us?" "Do you mean like our own language?" Jem asked curiously. "Exactly, Jem," I answered. We both agreed that knowing a secret language sounded fun. We already had the potion. Now all we needed was the right words to cast the spell. Jem agreed to loan me her witch costume that she wore for Halloween last year. It would work perfectly. The fact that her dog ate part of the rim off the hat made it seem less like a costume and more like the real thing. Then Jem asked, "Oh, what if this potion doesn't work?" "Jem, all good things come from this tree," I answered confidently, putting my hands on my hips. "Yeah, but we added things to it that didn't come from the tree. We added things like pickle juice and rainwater," Jem replied. "Well, those are just bonus ingredients. Have you ever known a pickle to be not what you'd hoped it would be? Besides, they come from nature too. It's gonna work, Jem. When he rides up the alley, I'll be standing there dressed in the switch costume, holding the pine potion in my hands, and then I'll say... Oh, wait, what am I going to say? I asked. We hadn't decided on that yet. Chester Holland Pfister, I exclaimed. That's it, I added proudly. Huh? Jem replied, looking puzzled. Isn't that the name of your egret stuffed animal? Chester Holland Pfister is the name of the stuffed animal that you won on Earth Day at the Nature Center, right? Jem asked, very confused. Yeah, but that boy doesn't know that. Besides, egrets rise in the air and they fly with their legs dangling down. That boy will rise up in the air like an egret after I cast the spell on him. Ha! I replied. Oh, Jem said. So you're gonna say Chester Holland Pfister and the boy will rise up as high as the pine tree and he's going to give you his gum and stop calling you Lone Oak Tree? Jem asked, puzzled. Chester Holland Pfister is only 3 words, Jem said, very confused. Yeah, I know, but if the potion's working, we don't have to remember what it means. He and his bike will just begin rising up. He'll give us a piece of that gum so quickly that we'll have already blown a huge bubble with it, I assured. Wow, Oak, your brain has a lot of thinking going on, Jem exclaimed. I thought that was a compliment, and so I said, Thanks, Jem. You were the one who thought of the potion. You always help me think better. Jem was quiet. Mom brought PB&J sandwiches to the tree for us. We thanked her for making our favorite sandwich, pickles, butter, and jam. No 3 things in the world went better together than that. On second thought, there was one thing. Jem, me, and tree. 1 Timothy 4:4. Since everything God created is good, we should not reject any of it, but receive it with thanks. Proverbs 13:20. Walk with the wise and become wise. Associate with fools and get in trouble. Chapter 6. Roots Grow Deep. After breakfast, Mom asked if I would help her fold and put away clothes. I told her that I was real anxious to get to the tree. She assured me that it wouldn't take very long and that I would be out of the tree in no time. I folded the clothes in a hurry, then I ran the clean piles of clothes to each person's room. Mom smiled and was pleased with my quickness. Mom did not know that I had plans today. Big plans. I had plans to stop that boy from teasing me forever. Jem and I arrived at the tree as soon as we could. It was sort of foggy out, which was real cool for anyone casting a spell on a mean, teasing, bike-riding, bubble-blowing boy. Jem remembered to bring the witch costume. She set it under the tree near the rock pile that hid the tin box with our pickled pine potion in it. We decided to make a wish for good luck. We found an extra long pine needle to wish upon. We closed our eyes and made our wishes. We never told our wishes to each other because, well, that was just bad luck. We gathered the pine cones we stored up and taped them into bundles to use for an emergency situation. I figured if they were taped in bundles, they wouldn't float back to us this time. We probably wouldn't even need the pine cones, but we taped them anyway. Then, for fun, I decided to aim the pine cone bundles at the spot in the sky where the potion would lift the boy and his bike. The fog cleared, and we threw those pine cones as high as we could. They came raining down on top of us, and we laughed and forgot all about what time it was. The church bells started ringing. It must have been lunchtime, and that boy would be riding by soon. We quickly picked up the bundled pine cones that were scattered in the alley. I thought about the pickled pine potion and hoped that it would be ready. I was beginning to doubt myself. Jim, maybe I should not have added the pickle juice to the potion. What if it backfires? I asked nervously. Then you're in a real pickle, Jem giggled. I was too nervous to giggle. I quickly ducked under the tree and changed into Jem's witch costume. The costume was really long, but once I put the shoes on, the costume would seem a bit shorter. Besides, I wasn't going anywhere. I just had to stand in the alley. I had to stand strong and still like an oak tree. I took a deep breath of pure oxygen under the tree because I thought I was going to faint thinking about this plan. I kicked off my tennis shoes and put on the high-heeled shoes that went with the costume. Jem was right. The heels on those shoes were really high. I felt like I was walking on a pair of Chinese chopsticks. Those shoes made me walk tippy-toes without even trying to. I was definitely going to need Jem's help in order to walk out to the alley where I had planned to stand to cast the spell. I grabbed the pickle pine potion from the tin box. I held it in my hand. My hand was sweaty. Jem held my other hand. Jem's hand felt warm and soft as she helped me walk toward the middle of the alley. Jem believed in me, even when she didn't understand what I was doing and why. She just made me feel better whenever she was near. I tried to assure myself that I had nothing to worry about because that potion was going to be good and ready. Jem wished me good luck, and I remembered to say thank you. This was another one of those difficult times when nerves and sweat get all tangled up. It was hard to put up a stop sign to the nervousness and remember to say thank you, but I did. I could feel the strength just building up in me. I watched Jem run back to the safety of the tree, where she was going to wait until she could see the boy coming and give me a signal. As soon as the boy was in sight, Jem would make a caw, caw sound like a crow to warn me he was coming. Jem had a better view where she waited under the tree because the tree was planted at the corner of the alley. She would be able to see him before he turned to bike up the alley towards me. I stood alone in the middle of the alley. I thought about the wish I'd made and wondered if Jem and I had made the same exact wish. I opened my hand and looked at the pickle pine potion. It had settled on the bottom a bit, so I gave it 4 lucky shakes. I didn't want to open it yet. I thought maybe if I did, it'd be like a can of shaken soda. It might hiss and bubble over at the top. Besides, it'd be better if I opened it right in front of that boy. I could feel fluttering in my tummy like a bunch of baby frogs were hatching and hopping around in there. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine myself as a big, strong oak tree. I opened my eyes to check over my shoulder to make sure I wasn't stepping on that long witch dress that I was wearing. That's when I saw it. It was big, really big, even from way back there behind me. It was headed in my direction. Usually, I was able to sense good things when I saw them. Usually, I was not afraid. Usually, things looked familiar and friendly. This did not look familiar or friendly. I sensed danger. It was a dog. A big dog. In fact, this dog looked, well, it looked hungry. Jem hadn't seen the dog because it was coming from behind me, not in front of me. I tried to shout to Jem, but it was as if the potion lifted my tongue right out of my mouth because no words came out at all. The dog was close to me now. His eyes stared at me and his tongue dripped with slobber. I tried to run, but those doggone heels wouldn't run right. I got tripped up in that long witch dress. I fell face down in the alley. The dog was biting the side of the witch costume. The dog tugged at the costume with his teeth. Jem finally looked in my direction and came running towards us. Suddenly, Jem pulled the dog by his tail, which startled him for a moment, but then the dog continued to bite at the costume. I had never seen Jem so powerful in my life. She took hold of that great big dog and was holding his ears like the handlebars on a bike. Jem looked right into his enormous eyes and said, "You listen here, Mr. Stray Dog. I'm trying to help my best friend. You'd better not try to eat her or you won't get any." Jem's jaw dropped when she noticed the dog treat. She reached down toward the pocket of the witch dress that I was wearing and pulled out the half-bitten sausage-like dog treat. It looked just like the one she bought from the dollar store. Oh, oopsie doodles. I forgot that I put the dog treat in the pocket of this witch costume. I put it there so that I'd remember to bring it to the tree, but I forgot to take it out of the pocket, Jem confessed. Then she turned to that dog and she said, "Oh, so that's why you were tugging on that dress, you big furry pup? You weren't trying to eat my friend, you were trying to get that dog treat. Oh, it's okay, Smoochy Poo Pup. Here's that treat you wanted." Jem handed the dog the half-eaten dog biscuit. Jem was hugging and nuzzling that big stray dog like it was Bingo was his name-o. I still laid there stunned and said, Jem. Hello, Jem, could you help me, please?" There I was, lying in the middle of the alley with my feet all twisted up in what felt like clown shoes and a circus tent of fabric. As if things weren't bad enough, along came that boy. "Quick, take the cork off the potion, Oaken," I thought to myself. I tried to get my hand untangled from the dress. When I finally did, that boy was riding alongside me. I could see the spokes of his wheels. I could hear him laughing all the way to the end of the alley. Suddenly, Jem's newfound stray dog bounded after that boy like a pup chasing a ball. The boy and the dog both disappeared at the end of the alley. Jem was calling and begging the dog to come back, but when the dog did not come, I noticed Jem's shoulders droop like the branches of our pine tree after it rained. I knew she felt sad that the stray dog she finally found was gone. I figured now Jem would know exactly who that meanie boy was. Whenever I mentioned him, it was that boy who took her new stray dog away. Jem looked sad. I thought she was going to cry. Instead, Jem managed to help me up, and she said it was all her fault for not watching from both directions in the alley. She apologized for that too big for me witch costume and those awkward high-heeled shoes. She was sad for not remembering how bad those shoes hurt her on Halloween night last year. She was sad that she hadn't seen the stray dog first. She could have brought him back to the tree to keep and feed him more dog treats. I looked at Jem and I said, "No, Jem. I lost my strength and I got scared and nervous. I couldn't even say help, much less Chester Holland Fister when I needed to. Let's just put that potion away, okay? Perhaps we let it get too strong anyway," I said, feeling defeated. We agreed to hide the potion away in the secret tin box for another day. Another far-off, long-away day. Maybe even forever. I took off the witch costume and told Jem that I was sorry that it ripped. Jem still looked sad, and I knew why. Jem wanted to keep that stray dog. Whenever Jem was quiet and sad, I just kept talking in hopes that I'd say something good and right. I hoped a stop sign might pop up and make me say something well-mannered. It might even fix her sadness. It seemed like a long time before Jem spoke. Finally, Jem said something. I was so relieved. "Oaken, I have an apology to make," Jem said softly. I quickly said, No, you don't have to apologize for anything, Jem. Besides, You always do the right thing. You never let anyone make you feel angry or mad. If anyone should apologize, I rambled. Stop, Oaken, and let me talk, Jem said abruptly. Surprised again with Jem's boldness, I sat stunned and I listened. I know we never tell our wishes to each other, but... Jem paused. What is it, Jem? I cautiously added. Well, when we wished on that pine needle, I wished the same wish I always wish for, only this time it came true. Jem's eyes welled with tears. Well, what did you wish for, Jem? I whispered. Well, I wish that someday my dog treats would find their way to a stray dog's mouth, Jem confessed. There was a pause. Then I laughed. I laughed uncontrollably. I thought I'd seen those tree branches shaking to the rhythm of my own body shaking from laughter. Jem, you are the best, I said between a fit of laughter. Then Jem, realizing the truth and the humor in that wish, smiled at first, and then a laugh just burst right out. We both laughed until tears were falling like sap from a tapped maple tree in the middle of March. Colossians 2:7. Let your roots grow down into him, and let your lives be built on him. Then your faith will grow strong in the truth you were taught, and you will overflow with thankfulness. Proverbs 26:11. As a dog returns to its vomit, so a fool repeats his foolishness. Chapter 7. Waiting for Sunshine. Mom woke up early and made us pancakes. I love these mornings. Mom made the pancakes small and fluffy just the way Millie and I liked them. There was a pitcher of orange juice and Graham's raspberry jelly on the table too. Dad always insisted on the real maple syrup, not that fake stuff. I love Dad for that sensibility. Oaken, could you please pass the syrup? Oak, when you finish breakfast, why don't you flee? Fleas are probably hopping up and down on your pancakes right now, Robbie joked. Mom, Robbie's teasing me. He says I have fleas, I shouted. Mom came in the room and told Robbie to put away the clothes she'd been asking him to put away all morning. The bumps on my skin itched so badly. I tried crisscrossing them with my fingernail to stop them itching, but even that didn't work. Mom reminded me that the doctor said that this rash was probably a virus and that it could take a week or two to get better. In the meantime, Mom suggested that I take a bath. She thought that would help me feel better. Ugh, I think I'd rather suffer the itching than endure scrubbing and hair combing. However, Mom started to run the bath water. Mom, where do fleas come from? I asked. Oak, you don't have fleas. Although they can live on dogs like the one you and Jem met in the alley 2 days ago, Mom said with a wink. What's the difference between regular fleas and polar ones? I asked curiously. Mom stopped putting the bath toys in the tub and looked at me confused. Huh? Well, Graham mentioned she was going to sew but needed some polar fleas, I added. I think Graham makes things from their silk. Maybe they're like spiders that spin silk, I continued as I peeled off my clothes to jump in the tub. Before jumping in, Mom turned my shoulders around and looked at me with a smile and she said, Oak, polar fleece is a type of fabric. Also, fleas do not make silk, Mom giggled. Mom began inspecting my hands and fingernails and saw sticky sap stuck to them and asked me to scrub really well with soap. I hopped in the tub and began pushing the water around and around in a whirlpool. A great thought came to me. I bet sap has healing powers. Maybe it would even stop things from itching, like this rash I have. Gramps told me that a lot of medicines came from nature. He said natural medicines healed many things. I quickly shampooed, rinsed, dried, and dressed. I was thinking of my great idea the whole time. I ate up what was left of my pancakes speedy quick, made sure I had my tree key, and ran out the porch door. I pretended to put the key in the keyhole and ducked under the tree. It needed a good sweep, but I had miracle sap on my mind, and I needed to gather some up. I saw a few thick drips, and dabbed some on my rash where it itched. As it turned out, all the bumps itched. So I put the sap on every one of the bumps. I lost count after 23. I waited to see if they felt itchy again, and after putting the sap on, I didn't scratch my bumps for a whole 14 seconds. Hey, sap really does work. Then, as I looked down at my sockless feet, I thought of a sap invention. Dirt socks. Dirt socks didn't need to be put on or taken off. They wouldn't stink, and they would always stay up. A person could put them on easily. Just smear sap on the lower leg and foot, then smooth on some soft dry dirt, and ta-da! Dirt socks. After I smeared the sap onto my feet, I noticed I had unintentionally created dirt gloves. I think that's called a 2-for-1. Wow, I was an inventor and a saleswoman, I thought to myself. I bet I could sell these. Dirt gloves and dirt socks come in one great color. That color went with everything. I knew because I wore a lot of it. Dirt. Also, everyone loves the scent of pine. That was a whole lot of great selling points. As I began sweeping with my new dirt socks, Jem came biking up to the fence post. I wouldn't have heard her except that she rang her bike bell whenever she was close to the tree. I had wanted to trade her so many things for that bell. I just didn't have the heart to ever make that kind of trade with her. She hopped off her purple banana seat bike. We called her bike Violetta, which meant violet purple in Spanish. Jem ducked under the tree with me. She took one look at my legs, and her eyes got really big. I think she liked my dirt socks. She didn't say anything, but she kept staring. Clearly, she was stunned and amazed. I finally told her that I would make her a pair too. Only there was a problem. First, Jem would have to take off her very clean white laced socks. Just then, the bike bandit, as I now called him. Ooh, that boy, he came riding right up the alley. He biked real slowly, staring at Violetta. He biked close enough to ring the bell on Jem's bike and would have, except he saw us under the tree. He pointed at my feet, and he laughed loudly. Undoubtedly, our tree was hurt too. The tree was on our side, and she would not stand for this kind of teasing. Then the bike bandit rode away quickly. There was something strange about that boy. I did not like him. I liked Meatloaf better than him. Then Jem said, staring at my legs, "Oak, the dirt socks are real interesting, but they do look kind of funny. Most of the dirt sticks to the sap spots and sap streaks, and your feet look sort of spotty and stripy." I huffed at her and told her she didn't know it, but this sock invention was going to make us rich. We could buy all the bubble gum we wanted in the whole world. The thoughts tumbled around in my head and out of my mouth like rocks in a rock tumbler. Jem had heard enough. She ducked out of the tree, she got on Violetta, and she rode away. She didn't even ring her bell, not even once. I walked slowly up the alley to my driveway and up to the back door. A van carrying several baseball players was waiting in the driveway to pick up Robbie for practice. Robbie came running out the door. He looked at me and stopped. He said, "Oaken, please tell me the guys didn't see you. Wait till Mom sees all that dirt." I felt hot tears puddling in my eye bottoms, and my hands instantly balled up into fists. I knew if he said one word, not even another word, even burped, I was going to slug him harder than he could slug a baseball. Robbie got into the van with the rest of the ball players, and the van drove away. Psalm 31:24. So be strong and courageous, all you who put your hope in the Lord. 1 Peter 3:9. Do not repay evil for evil. Don't retaliate with insults when people insult you. Instead, pay them back with a blessing. That's what God has called you to do, and He will bless you for it. Joshua 1:9. This is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Chapter 8. Warmed by the sun. I wanted to be at the tree, but my legs carried me to my bedroom instead. I figured the tree would be sad anyway because Jim and I were sad. I put on my warm slippers and dove into my bed. I pulled the covers over my head. I closed my eyes, imagining I was a caterpillar inside of a chrysalis. I was waiting to turn into a butterfly. After changing into a butterfly, I would come out of my chrysalis into the daylight where the world was bright and sunny. All I had to do today was sip nectar and flutter about. My mind wandered back to the tree. I couldn't help but think about the adventures that I would have had today under the tree had Jem still liked me. It was more fun with Jem, but Jem was kind of mad. I could tell by the way she left on her bike without ringing her bell. I was mad too. I felt like she didn't like any of my ideas. I jumped at the sound of my guppy alarm clock ringing and wiggling its fin. My sister Millie must have been playing with it and accidentally set the alarm. I couldn't even smile at my guppy alarm clock. That clock always made me smile. I noticed that all the covers were off me, and I sighed, thinking how I had come out of my chrysalis too early. Now what? I wondered what I was going to do today without Jem. It was just me and Tree today. I slowly made my way to the kitchen. I sat down and rested my chin on the edge of the kitchen table. I poked holes in the small stack of pancakes that were in front of me. Mom came into the kitchen and asked me what was wrong. Mom's got a knack for that kind of knowing. I told her it was nothing. Do you have plans with Jem today? Mom asked softly. She's probably riding bikes with that mean bike bandit and ringing bike bells together all around the neighborhood. They're probably chewing bubble gum for breakfast and wearing dirt socks and laughing right now, I grumbled. Oh, my, I see, Mom said. How about you and I bake cookies for Mr. Temke, Mom suggested. That man smells funny, I accidentally said out loud. Oaken Irene, Mom said disappointedly. Mom, actually I didn't mean to say that. It was supposed to stay in my head, but it slipped past my brain and landed on my tongue, I confessed. Oaken, that is enough. Mr. Temke adores you and tells me that he enjoys your company, Mom reminded me. Then I thought of Jem and how she would never say an unkind word about a neighbor or any other person. I felt sad and I wanted to cry. I hadn't meant to be unkind. I said sorry to Mom. She looked at me without saying anything for a very long time. It looked like Mom's eyes were about to cry too. Mom knelt down beside me at the table where my head was now resting beside my holy pancakes, and she said, Oaken, among the crazy things you say, and you can say the most loving things as well. She hugged me, and that was good, because I needed a hug. I liked the way Mom smelled. It wasn't full of strangeness, just earthy and momish. Besides, I wasn't in a big hurry to get to the tree without Jem. Then good manners happened again. Thanks, Mom, I said. This time I saw a tear come out of Mom's eye. I learned that sometimes love is like sap. Tears come out of eye holes just like sap comes out of the hole of a tapped maple tree. Maybe you'd feel better if you called Jem and told her how you felt, Mom suggested. I definitely came out of my chrysalis too early. I still felt sad, but I knew that I couldn't be a caterpillar forever. Besides, I was out of my chrysalis and I needed nectar. The problem was that Jem was like nectar for me, and Jem was mad at me. I needed to call Jem. I dialed her number. When Jem answered, I said, Jem, I'm sad. I feel like an ant that's been stepped on. You don't like my ideas, but you do like that boy, even though he's mean to me. And, well, you were the one who said we were like PB and... Oaken, Jem interrupted. I want to say sorry, too, and that I miss you already. Oak, I didn't mean to hurt you. I do like most of your ideas, but sometimes they're kind of funny, too. I wish that boy wouldn't tease you. I know it hurts you. I miss you and I want to play with you. There was a pause, and Jem quickly said, Meet you at the tree in 3. Bye. That meant 3 seconds, of course. Bye, I said. I hung up the phone and wondered if Jem was truly going to beat me there. The tree was looking extra tall now, like she was proud of us. I felt taller, too. I told Jem that I overheard Robbie and his friends talking about playing ball in the alley after practice. I thought maybe we could play, too. Jem wasn't sure about that idea because she didn't know how to play very well. I suggested that we'd be on the same team, play in the same position, and take turns hitting the ball when it was our turn to bat. Jem agreed to play if we could do everything together. Meanwhile, we swept under the tree and played there until Robbie returned home from practice. Hey, Jem, how about if you ask Robbie if we can play? He likes you, and your mom lets him walk your dog. He'd be more likely to say yes to you, I suggested. Oh, how do you get me into these pickles? Jem replied. I don't know why that word pickle was so funny, but it just was. We waited for all his friends to show up and take their positions in the alley. Robbie was shouting out the rules about home runs over Mr. Temke's mailbox and the number of outs each team had. Jem approached him shyly, and she said, Excuse me, Robbie, can Oak and I play too? We have our baseball gloves right here. Jeb Dunkus, the third baseman and Robbie's good friend, looked at Jem like she was a gnat. He turned to throw the baseball around the horn. That's when Robbie said, Hey, guys, we could each have one of the girls on our team to chase after the foul balls, he chuckled. That's when I came storming out from under that tree and I said, That's right, Robbie. You're going to need us to chase your foul balls because you can't hit a fair ball, I replied. The whole team giggled under Robbie's glare. I knew that would make him stop talking. Jem and I were allowed to play just as we had wanted. We were able to play on the same team, same position, and we both got to bat. It's like Graham says in situations like these, tighten up your britches and get the job done. That reminded me that I needed to ask Graham what britches even were. Jem and I were having fun. The game was tied 2-2, and I was up. The first pitch, I looked at it and decided to let it go by. Because, well, good things come to those who wait. I waited for the second pitch to cross the plate, too. It was getting hard to wait any longer. The third pitch was bound for Timbuktu, or maybe even Mr. Temke's mailbox. I closed my eyes and I hit that ball as hard as I could. I opened my eyes to the throng of boys yelling, Fall ball! All I saw was a branch of my dear tree fallen down along with that cursed baseball. I immediately dropped the bat. Jem and I went running to the tree to see if it was okay. I felt horrible inside. I picked up the branch and wondered where it had fallen from. We were looking all around the tree and up at the tree, but still couldn't tell where it had fallen from. The team was yelling for us to get back in the game, but the game didn't matter at all to us. The boys kept right on playing as if nothing even happened. I wanted to yell at Robbie for his insensitivity toward living things, but I wrapped my arms around the trunk of the tree and hugged her instead. I apologized to the tree. I hadn't meant to harm her. Why'd I have to play that game of baseball, I asked myself. I knew I had to climb the tree to where the branch had broken so that I could fix it. Before I did that, Jem and I had to haul my dad's ladder through the middle of the baseball game to get to the tree. The baseball game continued as if we were two dandelion seeds blown in the breeze. I huffed at Robbie and wished just this once he'd be nice to me and help carry this heavy lunk of a ladder for me. We agreed we didn't need the key this time to get in the tree. We propped the ladder against the trunk. We opened our secret tin box and took out the Wonder Woman bandages. I climbed while Jem held the ladder. I climbed 4 steps up the ladder. I looked around and I whispered a prayer for a squirrel to show me where I needed to bandage the branch. I listened real carefully, but I didn't hear or see any squirrel. I lowered my head and almost started to cry, but then I saw a place where the branch may have broken. I stepped down 1 ladder rung and quickly went to work. I used the whole box of Wonder Woman bandages, plus some string to attach the branch back onto the tree. I prayed again that these bandages would do what the TV commercial said they'd do: heal with superhero strength. We carried the ladder back to the garage. I told Jem that it was another bad idea of mine to play ball. Jem disagreed and reminded me of the fun that we had playing baseball our way. For example, Jem and I both got to stay on base because the boys hadn't tagged both of us out. Also, we stole bases backwards. When they asked and looked confused, we told them it was opposite day. Besides, Jem believed that if our tree stood strong against wind and snow, squirrels and lumberjacks and woodpeckers, that it surely wouldn't be hurt by a small baseball. Although to me, getting smacked with a baseball seemed mean and unnatural. Jem assured me again that the tree knew how sorry I was and that it would be okay. "Oak, you take such good care of this tree." "Not today, I didn't. Felt like I hurt her," I sadly said. "Oak, it was an accident. Besides, you did a great job bandaging her up," Jem assured. I still felt sad, and I knew that it wouldn't be much fun today. "Bye, Jem. I have to go," I said. I couldn't stop the tears from falling from my eye holes, no matter how hard I tried. I told Mom what happened, but I still kept crying. She told me everything was going to be okay, but I didn't believe her. Finally, Mom noticed that I was overcome with sadness. It seemed nothing she said was going to make me feel better. Mom said she had an idea. She offered to go over to Mrs. Grover's with me to explain the accident. Mom suggested that I tell Mrs. Grover how I felt and what happened. She explained that expert gardeners like Mrs. Grover knew exactly what to do in situations like these. I was really nervous standing at Mrs. Grover's doorstep. Mom put her arm around me and handed me a tissue to blow my nose. We could see Mrs. Grover coming to the door, and the screen door opened. I stuffed the tissue in my pocket, and Mrs. Grover greeted us and asked us to sit down at the table. She poured 3 large glasses of lemonade. Her kindness made my stomach feel worse as I thought about telling her how I had hurt her tree. The tree I thought was mine, but really belonged to Miss Grover. After all, it was planted on her property. Then Mom spoke. "Mrs. Grover, the kids were playing baseball in the alley and—" I couldn't stand to wait any longer. My whole body felt like hot lava, and I erupted. "I hurt the tree. I didn't mean to hurt her. I care for her so much, but I did hurt her. I hit the ball and a branch crashed to the ground. I'm sorry that I hurt the tree, your tree. I hope she's going to be okay." I lowered my head and I tried not to erupt again. Mrs. Grover stood up. She walked over to me. I was looking down at my legs, shaking as I sat in the chair. I twisted all my fingers around and around. Mrs. Grover knelt down beside me and she put her hand around my shoulder. "Oaken, thank you. Speaking the truth is courageous. I see that you care for that tree very much. You've been taking very good care of her. I think that's a beautiful thing to do. Although I want you to know that the tree doesn't really belong to me. Mrs. Grover softly said. I looked up at her, puzzled. That tree belongs to God. He created that tree. I just planted it, that's all. I believe God wants all of us to care for it. Besides, a little pruning is just what it may have needed anyway. Do you know what it means to prune? Mrs. Grover asked. When I didn't answer, she said, it means to cut back the old branches so that new life can grow and strengthen the tree. Funny thing, isn't it? God prunes us too, to strengthen us. Thank goodness he does, or we'd never change or grow. Then Mrs. Grover handed me a real broom with a sturdy wooden handle and told me that I could keep it and use it under the tree. Every good steward of nature needs tools for tending, Mrs. Grover gently said. Mom and I thanked Mrs. Grover for the broom and for understanding, and we stepped out the door. We walked home across the alley. Mom's idea to talk to Miss Grover did help me. I felt better about telling Mrs. Grover what had happened. I felt better knowing that the tree would be okay, and that pruning, as Mrs. Grover called it, would actually strengthen the tree. Thankfully, I had not seen that boy ride by today. I was afraid he would have really hurt me today with his teasing words. Undoubtedly, he would have scored a home run. John 15:1. I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit, so they will produce even more. Zechariah 8:16. But this is what you must do. Tell the truth to each other. Render verdicts in your courts that are just and that lead to peace. Chapter 9. Rain again. This morning I woke up to my family bustling about, everyone except Dad. Dad was still in his PJs just like me. I liked that about Dad. He did things slowly. He loved to wake up slowly on the weekends. He would shuffle around in his slippers, sipping coffee and reading the paper. I liked to just breathe that slowness in sometimes. When I'm not at the tree, I'm getting rushed here and there, and I don't like here and there very much. Mom was bustling about trying on dresses with different pairs of shoes. I hoped I wasn't involved in this bustling about today. Admittedly, I was curious. I wondered what was going on that made her so busy. It wasn't a good sign. I hoped that I would not have to wear a dress and white tights. The shoes would be the same ones as always. They were the hand-me-down shoes that reminded me of Graham's white raincoat. My cousin Lily must have had a pair in every size because my feet just kept fitting into them no matter how much my feet continued to grow. Oaken, Mom called out loudly. The sound of that single name and the way she said it made me not want to answer. But I did answer, because what if Mom truly needed me? Maybe her hair was wound up in the electric mixer. Unfortunately, it turned out to be what I was afraid it might be. Here and there. Robbie was going to receive a volunteer award and get his picture taken. A picture of him and his whole family would be taken and printed in the community newspaper. What? I asked, shocked. Robbie did something nice for someone, I thought. This just didn't seem like Robbie. The same Robbie that bugged me endlessly was getting an award? Perhaps they got the wrong Robbie. After all, his real name is Robert. I would have to wear a dress and get a family photo for something I was quite against. As I was talking to Mom about this important matter, Robbie entered the room and I just stared at him. On the account of he looked like a mini version of Dad with a suit and tie on. He had those same raincoat shoes on, only in black. Robbie smiled proudly and he joked, Is Oak gonna wear a dress made out of dirt or pine needles? Mom looked sternly at Robbie and ordered him to remind Dad to get ready. Mom told me to put on the yellow sundress with the orange flowers around the neck. the white knee-highs, and those shiny white shoes. I huffed as I left the room and wished that I was hiding under the tree. I tried to put those white shoes on. They just wouldn't bend. I already knew I couldn't skip, jump, or run in them. Those shoes were traps for my feet. If I wanted to kick them off, too bad for me because the mini shoe belts held my feet prisoner. I imagined my feet screaming, "We're trapped! Can someone let us out?" I thought I would if I could, but now my body would also be trapped in this dress. Nothing fun ever happened in a dress. In fact, last time I wore one, I almost was attacked by a stray dog. It was clear I had accidentally put on my sister Millie's white shoes, which were way too small for me. So I took them off and rummaged for the dress instead. I had to learn a whole new set of stop signs in a dress. Signs like stop slouching, stop doing somersaults, stop doing cartwheels or any other fun gymnastic-like moves, and stop to lift your dress up before going to the bathroom. Once when I was in a bathroom at a wedding, I sat on the toilet, but I forgot to lift my dress up and I got the whole bottom ruffle wet. Mom was frowny and her eyebrows looked like lightning bolts when I came out of the bathroom without my dress or tights on. Although what she did not seem to notice was the very creative shirt and matching pants outfit that I had made out of toilet paper. I kept complaining as I slid the hangers on the closet rod trying to find the dress that I was supposed to wear. I grumbled about how dresses should be called don'ts, because that's the word I heard whenever I wore one. Don't run, don't bend over, don't get dirty, don't get your dress wet on the toilet. Who invented this dress anyway? I asked myself. I finally found the dress Mom asked me to wear. I pulled it over my head and wished that I had invented the dirt dress because I'd much rather wear that instead. Now I had to look for my pair of shiny white shoes. Just then, my little sister Millie was clip-clopping toward me with them on. How come she loved them so much, I wondered. Then I remembered she was a toddler. Mom said toddlers are interesting little people. I agreed with Mom. Toddlers were interesting, and they sure cry a lot, too. I think all that crying destroys their brain nuggets, because I've seen Millie walk right into furniture. Mom shouted my name and asked if I was ready. I knew I needed to hurry. I had to think cleverly if I was ever going to get those shoes off of Millie's feet without her destroying more brain nuggets. Hey, Millie, I'll let you wear my cowgirl boots if I can wear those white shoes, I slyly persuaded. Millie, look at Oakie's feet. I'm wearing cowgirl boots. Look, I'm a cowgirl. Howdy, partner, I added. Millie laughed at my cowgirl walk and wanted to try them on too. It was cute to watch her walk around in those cowgirl boots. The tops of the boots were touching her diaper. She went running down the hall. The next thing I knew, she tripped in those big boots and bumped her head on the bookcase. She cried loudly. I plugged my ears and tried to run to pick her up. Thank goodness, no blood. However, she did have a big bump and it looked really ouchy. I gave her a hug and I told her I was sorry that I traded the white shoes. Maybe I was losing my brain nuggets too, I worried. I quickly tried to sing the alphabet to make sure my brain was working. Surprisingly, singing the alphabet made Millie stop crying. Thankfully, my brain was working again. Millie lifted her head off my shoulder and looked at me in my dress, and she said, "Okie looks pretty." "Oh, thanks, Mill," I said. "I don't like dresses." "But guess what, Millie? Someday it'll be your dress," I added, smiling. Just then, Mom appeared and scooped up Millie and held her close. After a moment, Mom set Millie down again to inspect the golf ball-sized bump growing out of her forehead. "Mom, won't that big bump make for a real 3D photo today?" I asked curiously. Mom scolded me for putting those boots on Millie. I must have looked like I was going to cry because Mom said that I looked very beautiful and that we needed to get into the car. She asked whether or not I wanted to wear my hair pulled back. I looked shocked because she never asked that kind of question before. In fact, I forgot I even had hair. Mom told me to hop in the car and brush my hair along the way. When we arrived, the photographer hurriedly set our bodies in place. He looked displeased with the bump on Millie's head, but asked us to smile and say cheese anyway. We learned that the photo would be mailed to us in a few days. Robbie got a medal, and they told him that his picture would be in the paper next to his supportive family. Each of our names would be printed underneath the photo. I hoped that my name would be misspelled. I wouldn't care so much this time. It'd remind me that this whole event was awkward anyway. Robbie getting an award and all. Also, Millie's picture with the huge bump on her forehead would help to make it look less honorary too. On the way home, Millie and I played peekaboo in the back seat, and I whispered to Millie that girls rule. I imagined Graham winking at me for using her line. I couldn't wait to get out of this dress, these shoes and the tights, and put on some play clothes. I was anxious to get to the tree. I hoped Jem hadn't called. I'd have to call her right away. Maybe she would already be at the tree. When we turned the corner, I noticed someone had been by the tree, and it wasn't Jem. I saw the back of the bike bandit riding down the alley. 1 Corinthians 6:19 and 20. Don't you realize that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who lives in you and was given to you by God? You do not belong to yourself, for God bought you with a high price. So you must honor God with your body. Proverbs 31:30. Charm is deceptive and beauty does not last, but a woman who fears the Lord will be greatly praised. Chapter 10. Sprouting yet? I put my hands on my ribs and felt them go up and down as I took 4 big breaths of pure, clean oxygen. I needed to trade all that stuffy air for some new air. It felt so great to be under the tree again and not here or there. I was happy that I wasn't getting my picture taken. I was happy to be in my play clothes with my best friend, having fun and breathing in new oxygen. Jem and I missed the tree and we cleaned up under it and watered her. When our backs were turned, my cousin Will ducked under the tree and shouted, "Boo!" Jem and I jumped and I turned to see my cousin Will. I hugged him tightly. I loved my cousin Will. He worked as a naturalist. He told me that a naturalist was a person who loved to study nature and could share it with other people. He worked outdoors mostly, but sometimes he taught inside a classroom. He shared interesting stories with me about honeybees, caterpillars, trees, tadpoles, and funny stories of kids that he taught. He's the one that taught me how to tap a real maple tree and boil off the water to make maple syrup. Will reached for a box from behind where he was standing and handed it to me. He brought me a leopard frog. The frog was in an aquarium with a little pool he made himself. He told me that I could observe the frog for 1 day, but insisted that we return the frog to nature the very next day. I respect those kinds of thoughts from people's brains. I hugged Will again. He had to get to work, so he said goodbye and ducked back out of the tree. Will was allowed to come under this tree any time he wanted. The tree loved him too. Jem and I stared at the frog, admiring its pickle-like skin. We decided that Pickles would be a great name for the frog. We both agreed she had to be a girl because she looked smart. She loved dirt, just like Jem and me. She seemed at home under the tree with us. For now, Pickles was a gift from my favorite cousin for us to enjoy for the day. I remembered I had a book about frogs on my bookshelf in the house. I told Jem that I'd be right back, and I went to get my book. Surprisingly, I had ducked to go out of the tree. I saw the bike bandit. What was he doing stopped in the middle of the alley, I wondered. It looked like he was having bike trouble. I decided to remain hidden under the tree and get my frog book later. It looked like his pant leg was stuck in his bike chain. This was the moment I had been waiting for. He was straddling his bike, looking down at his pant leg. I whispered to Jem, Should we get out the potion that we stored away? Jem just watched him. Then I said, what if we swiped his hat right off his head and we ran? Jem's eyes stayed fixed on him, and that usually meant either she didn't hear me or she did not like the plan. Jem, I asked if she heard me. No, Oak, I'm not that fast. And besides, where are we going to run to? Then he'd really be mad. Maybe we should help him, Jem suggested. I looked at Jem confused. Maybe he needs a friend, Jem whispered. Just then, Pickles the frog hopped right into her pool, and Jem took it as a sign that Pickles agreed with her. Boldly, Jem ducked out of the tree and walked toward the bike bandit. He quickly walked his pedal forward and freed his pant leg. He stood up to pedal with more strength and pedaled right up the alley and out of sight. Jem yelled, Hey, I was just going to help you. She came back to the tree with a weird look on her face. What are you doing, Jem? We don't want him under this tree ever, I said, shocked. Oaken, he seemed sad, Jem said softly. It was only a pair of pants, I thought. It was strange. Jem wasn't ever interested in this boy until now. She felt he was sad, and that hurt Jem to know anyone was sad. She couldn't stand to see anyone suffering, even a meanie like the bike bandit. Jem added, We'd never seen him ride with a friend. Maybe he doesn't know anyone. I wonder where he lives, Jem thought out loud. That's it. Jem McAllister, you are a genius. We'll follow him. We'll follow him like spies, I replied. We'll have to keep this secret because we are not allowed to go wandering off. Pickles, Jem, and I discussed the spy plan. I knew that we needed to take Pickles along with us on this spy mission. Pickles brought good thoughts, and I was sure we needed those. I smiled a real wide smile, knowing that this was going to be adventurous. Mom pulled out of the driveway as I was headed for the house to get a bag to carry Pickles in and grab my frog book. She slowed down when she saw me, and she said, Oaken, Dad is home today. He's in the house. I'll be gone for a short while. I'm going to drop this recipe off at Grandma's. Oh, Mom, wait. Look what Cousin Will brought me. I get to keep him for a whole day and night. It's an amphibian, Mom. Her name is Pickles. You need to describe every detail to Graham. Graham digs amphibians too, I excitedly said. Oak, where is that frog going to sleep tonight? Mom asked curiously. She'll sleep with me, Mom. She'll be in her aquarium, I answered. Oh, Oaken, when I named you after nature, I didn't realize that you'd become such a part of it, Mom said. Then Mom rubbed my hair all messy on top. She said goodbye and slowly turned the corner toward Graham's house. The plan was that we would hop on Violetta, me on the back of the seat, and Jem pedaling in the front. This reminded me that we hadn't practiced this stunt. It was okay if we were slow because, well, spies never followed real close to the person being spied on. We didn't want him to see us. Then we'd hide in a bush or a pine tree. This made me think we should be camouflaged. Once the bike bandit got to his house, we'd pull out the spy scope that we made out of 2 toilet paper rolls. We'd spy on that boy. One person needed to be the lookout person because it might be against the law to be spying in the first place. Do you have the spy scope? I asked Jem. Check, Jem replied. Do you have Violetta? I asked Jem. Check, Jem repeated again. Is Pickles in the carrying bag with breathing holes? I asked Jem. Check, Jem said. I agreed to hold Pickles on the back of the bike while Jem steered and pedaled the bike. I remembered Robbie had a camouflage bed sheet on his bed that we could use to disguise ourselves. I ran to get it and was back in a flash. We cut Robbie's bed sheet into 2 pieces to use as capes. Pickles was already camouflaged. We wet our hands with spit and rubbed dirt on our face and hands to better disguise ourselves. Oak, this is a good time to look for a place to set Pickles free, Jem suggested. Yep, but I figure she's got to have some fun first. I mean, how often does a frog get to experience a great spy adventure? I asked Jem. We set out on Jem's bike Violetta. I got nervous thinking about the bandit's bike skills. and knew our biking skills did not compare. We didn't seem to get anywhere for a very long time. The bike was difficult to pedal with Jim, me, and Pickles on it. Just as we got going a tiny bit, the bike would tip over. We had to put a leg out to catch ourselves before falling. We tried again and again to ride that wobbly bike with all of us, but it was no use. We finally agreed we'd need a better way to travel. Already, Mom was returning from Graham's. She pulled up and asked us where we were off to on Jem's bike. I told Mom the truth, that we weren't going anywhere on that bike. She looked at me and smiled with relief. Mom didn't like me playing in the alley. She probably didn't like me on the back of Jem's bike or seeing us with capes made of Robbie's bedsheet. We agreed to come up with a better plan. We needed a plan that involved walking or running instead. We were both tired and agreed to meet at the tree tomorrow. We needed to figure out where the bike bandit even lived and where Pickles was going to live. Tomorrow we would set Pickles free. Luke 12:21. Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God. Proverbs 3:5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek His will in all you do, and He will show you which path to take. Chapter 11. Surprise! Pickles slept by the side of my bed in her aquarium. I looked over the side of the bed to check on her. She sat on a rock looking out at the glass. I couldn't help but wonder if she wanted to be free. I thanked her for letting me care for her for a short while. I knew today was the day we would have to set Pickles free. I knew it was the right thing to do. Besides, I knew she was meant to live in God's creation, not this small aquarium that she was in now. Jem and I needed to find a safe place for Pickles where it was both shady and sunny. Pickles needed water and bugs to eat in order to survive. I took her out of the aquarium and put her into my bug box. Jem and I met at the tree. We decided to take a short walk up the alley to look for a good place to set Pickles free. Up the alley about 3 houses, we saw a backyard with a small pond in it. It had rocks and grass and flowers around it. The water trickled down a set of 5 flat rocks stacked on top of one another. It reminded me of the spa Graham talked about in Mexico. This looked like a great place for Pickles to live. I hoped the people who lived here liked amphibians. Jem convinced me that anyone who cared enough to plant flowers and set up a pond had to be nature-loving people. I finally agreed and we crept up to the backyard. Nobody was outside and the garage doors were closed. It looked like no one was home. We quickly knelt down by the beautiful pond. We opened the bug box, which held Pickles. I said a prayer for her safety and her happiness. We both thanked her again. We promised to visit soon to check on her. Her little puffer belly seemed to get bigger as she seemed anxious to jump free. I think she was smiling. Pickles jumped out of the box and onto the grass near the pond, which was right beside a small sidewalk leading to the garage. Suddenly, we heard that garage door open. Jem and I dove behind the nearest bush and hoped it would hide us. Now Pickles was hopping through the grass. It was hard to see her until she hopped right onto the sidewalk. Someone came running out of the garage door onto the small sidewalk. The person almost stepped right on Pickles, but Pickles hopped. The person stopped. I quickly shouted, "No!" and leapt out of my hiding spot. I was about to rescue Pickles when I noticed that person in front of me was the bike bandit. We were at the home of that mini bike bandit without even realizing it. I was about to grab Pickles, but the boy took off his baseball hat and scooped Pickles right up. He was holding her in his hat. I stood up looking like a frozen popsicle outside of its wrapper. I just stared. I must have been standing there for a while because Jem kept calling my name, asking if Pickles was okay. Then Jem came out from behind the bush and noticed that the boy was not a boy at all. That boy had blonde hair pinned up with a sparkly turtle pin in it. What? I was shocked. I couldn't believe this whole time who I thought was a boy was really a girl just like us. Could it be? It was a girl? She was a girl that was mean and could ride a bike really well and blow huge bubbles? A girl. Wow. Jem looked equally shocked but admired the sparkly turtle pin in her hair. The girl was looking straight at us and asked what we were doing in her backyard. I looked at Jem. Jem told her that we were just trying to set our frog free into the lovely pond. That girl seemed mad at us and stared at me. I quickly added that we were sorry for trespassing. But just as soon as I said that, I took that apology right back, and I said, No, I'm not sorry. Jem looked at me confused. Then I tried to be brave. I'm not sorry, because I don't like the way you ride past me and you tease me. How do you even know my name? I asked. Just then the girl's dad came out of the house and kissed her on the top of the head, and he said, Bye, Eddie. Hey, who are these new friends? Her dad asked. They are not my friends, the girl shot back. She gently took Pickles out of her hat and set her near the pond. Fearing that we had trespassed, I boldly said, Hi, my name's Oaken. I'm named after the big strong oak tree. And this here is Jem. You know, like a one-of-a-kind gemstone you might be lucky enough to find rock hounding. I held out my newly invented dirt glove hand for her dad to shake. He smiled, but did not shake my hand in return. Her dad went back in the house. He said he forgot his keys. I put my hand into my pocket and looked at Jem. Jem didn't say anything. Nobody talked for a minute. I was real nervous, and I was still mad at that girl. Jem spoke first. I like the name Eddie. My name is not Eddie. It's Adele, the girl corrected. Oh, well, I like that name too. I think it's neat that your dad calls you Eddie, Jem complimented. Eddie's like a trick name. It's kind of like, well, it sounds like, it's not a girl's name and it rhymes with sweaty. I stammered nervously. Jem looked at me with bug eyes, which meant I should stop talking. Jem turned to Adele and she whispered, Oaken is sad because I quickly butt in because I knew Jem was going to tell her that I was sad because my feelings were hurt. I quickly said, Frog. Jem meant to say frog. I faked a laugh and then I quickly looked serious. Yeah, I'm sad because my frog almost got hurt. Adele looked away. Her dad returned after finding his keys and said, Sure is nice to meet some young people in the neighborhood. We don't know many people here. Do you girls live close by? Yes, we do. Oaken lives just down the alley, Jem answered. Jem looked at Adele's bike and said, I really liked your bike. Adele's dad nudged Adele with his hand to remind her to respond politely to the compliment. Thanks, Adele answered. Jem poked me in the arm and looked at me and asked, Should we? Should we what? I wanted to scream, but my stomach was queasy like I was going to throw up if I opened my mouth. Did Jem want to show Adele the tree? Was this happening? Did Jem want to show her our beloved tree? The tree that never hurt me, teased me, or did anything wrong? I was sure that Jem felt as sick about this as I did. I was wrong. Jem wanted to show Adele our tree. I mean, showing our tree to Adele was like showing treasure to a pirate. We hardly knew this girl, and what we did know was that she teased me. Now Jem wanted to show her our most favorite thing on the planet. I instantly felt like I was going to be sick. I looked at Jem, I looked at Adele, and at that moment I knew I couldn't do this. I ran to my house without looking back. I left Jem and Adele standing there. I ran to my room, dove in my bed, pulled the covers over my head, and pretended to be inside my chrysalis. I cried. In between sobs, I thought to myself, I'm a scared little caterpillar. I'm a weak seedling. I ran away from Jem and Adele because I was mad and afraid. I was afraid that Jem would become Adele's new best friend. Yeah, the Adele that teased me about my name. I was afraid that she was more fun, more exciting than me. I was mad at Adele. I was afraid she was going to use up all the oxygen and I wouldn't be able to breathe. I continued to cry. I wondered how Mom and Dad could give me such a strong name when all I felt like was a shaking aspen leaf. My nose was wet and drippy, so I blew my nose into a tissue at the side of my bed. I hadn't heard my brother Robbie enter my room until he pounced on my bed. He laid there on his back, throwing a baseball up in the air and catching it in his glove. "Tie-breaking games are so intense," Robbie said. "The ball game is tied up. There's a lot of pressure on the players. Whoever scores the next run wins the game. It's an important game, a game your whole career is riding on," Robbie said out loud. I didn't want my annoying brother in my room lying on my bed bragging about how great he was at baseball, and I certainly did not want to be listening to his silly story about a tie-breaking game. But I couldn't stop listening. The story he was telling was sort of interesting. I remained under the covers and he spoke again. "Oaken, it's the tie-breaking run of the World Series game. I, Robbie, the greatest left fielder ever to play the game, am about to make the tie-breaking run catch. I ask myself, do I want to catch the ball or do I want the batter to hit it to someone else? But it's too late. The ball's been hit. It was hit hard. It was hit to me. I ran back for it, way back to the fence. It was a night game and the lights lit the field. The fans in the stands were all cheering my name. Robbie, Robbie. I lined up the ball with my glove and I yelled, I got it. I peeked out of the covers just in time to see Robbie pretend to miss the ball that he threw up in the air. He pretended that the ball hit him on the head and knocked him out. He made a real funny dying sound and it made me giggle unexpectedly. I really loved him in that moment. He flung the covers off me and tossed my baseball glove on me. He asked if I wanted to play catch on the boulevard. I usually love playing catch. I told him that I was sorry. I just wasn't in the mood. Robbie grabbed my arm and dragged me out of bed and said, "Anything you want, Oaken, grounders, poppers, you name it and I'll throw it to ya." "I thought you just got knocked out in the World Series game," I said jokingly. "Oak, baseball greats like me have to get back up and keep playing." Robbie smiled and tossed me the ball. I threw it back to him. We headed outside to play catch. Robbie was throwing me grounders, and some of them I was catching, and others just rolled between my legs. He told me to keep my glove on the ground and watch the ball all the way to my glove. I didn't mind the advice because he was being real nice about it. Although I kept thinking about Jim and Adele, and I couldn't focus on the ball, I decided to go back up to my room. I thanked Robbie for playing catch with me and told him my arm needed a rest. He replied, "You're welcome, Weasel. Hey, and by the way, you owe me a new bed sheet." I slowly walked into the house. Mom was cooking in the kitchen. She looked hot and frustrated. She kept repeating the ingredients on a recipe card. I noticed all the cupboard doors were open and a large pot of something was boiling on the stove. Millie was in her high chair eating a banana. I was about to turn around and go to my room, but Millie started to cry and rub her eyes with mashed banana fists. I bravely took off the tray of Millie's high chair and tried my best to wash Millie's face and hands. Mom's eyes remained fixed on the recipe card, but she turned quickly to unclick the high chair safety belt to free Millie. Millie leaned into me and almost knocked me, her and the high chair, right over, but I managed to hold her up for a second before she stood on her own feet. I walked her over to the book basket and told Millie to choose a book for me to read. We sat down on the rug. I knew Millie was going to choose the animal book. She loved it when I made all the animal sounds. Usually I made the animal faces, too. But my heart wasn't in it today. I read her another book before Mom finally relieved me. Mom said she was frustrated. She took off her apron and tossed it over my head. She sunk into the beanbag chair and she said, "I don't have the right ingredients for that recipe." Mom asked how I felt about having hot dogs for dinner. Normally I'd be thrilled about hot dogs, but today I just faked a smile. I pulled the apron off my head and I looked back down at the books. Mom got out of the beanbag and crawled over to me and lifted up my chin. She looked into my eyes and said, "Is everything okay, Oaken?" When I didn't reply, she scooped up Millie and she said, "I'm going to put Millie down for a nap. Then you and I are going to make the best hot dogs ever." All Millie heard was dog, and she put her hands up and she shouted, "Roof, roof." I hadn't moved from the spot on the floor where Mom left me. She returned and said, "It looks like you could use some help picking up these books. By the way, Oaken, thank you for helping me with Millie." Mom smiled. "Help like that doesn't come by often, but when it does, it's so appreciated," she added. "Oh, I almost forgot. Jem called while you were playing catch," Mom said. Mom noticed I hadn't jumped up and ran to the phone. I was just plain sad. Mom said, "Life sure isn't like the board game, huh, Oaken?" I agreed, even though I didn't remember playing that board game. "People can be difficult. We can be difficult too," Mom added. "Knowing how to get along can be tricky." "I don't know much, Oak, but I do know some things. Can I share with you what I know?" Mom asked. I nodded yes. "Oaken, you're God's specialty. God made you with all the right ingredients. If you use your ingredients for good, you're sure to be a blue ribbon recipe." Mom hugged me tightly. She smelled like the kitchen and a little like mashed bananas too. Then I asked Mom, "What if I goof it all up?" "I do that a lot, Mom." Mom winked at me and she said, "Well, then you make hot dogs." I smiled at Mom because although I didn't know what hot dogs had to do with Jem, Adele, and me, she was kind of funny. We finished picking up the books together. Mom asked me to sit beside her on the couch. She held an old scrapbook on her lap. She opened the scrapbook and told me all about Graham. She told me things I never knew. Mom unfolded an old newspaper article and began telling me that Grandma used to play for the Northerners baseball team. It was the best baseball team in the state at the time. It was rare for a woman to play ball, then, and even more rare for one to play on an all-male baseball team. She told me how Graham's team won the state championship and they got their picture in the Northern Times newspaper. That's how my Graham met my grandpa. Mom explained that Grandpa used to keep score for the team, and he enjoyed watching her play. They lived in the same town together. After the newspaper reported the big baseball win, Grandpa finally got the courage to ask her on a date. Mom closed the scrapbook and left it beside me on the couch. "Now, are you going to help me make the best hot dogs ever?" Mom asked. But Mom noticed that I wasn't paying attention to what she asked. I sat and I paged through Grandma's scrapbook. Mom stood up and left to make hot dogs, which I knew she could make by herself anyway. The story about my grandma made me feel strong again. It was as if it had just rained and I was drinking that water with my roots. To think I came from the same stuffing as my Gram? There was no chance I was weak. Besides, I had a strong name and a grandma who made headlines in sports news playing for an all-boys baseball team. I had famous jeans, and I don't mean the ones you wear on your legs. I decided to call Graham and ask her all kinds of questions about that baseball team and her amazing self. The one question I couldn't wait to ask her was where she got it. Where she got the courage to play on an all-boys baseball team. I asked myself, did I have it? Did I have this thing called courage? Was that what it meant to be courageous? I imagined every famous gene in my body screaming yes. Tomorrow was a brand new day, and I would have the courage to call Jem and apologize. Proverbs 17:17. A friend is always loyal, and a brother is born to help in time of need. Isaiah 41:13. For I hold you by your right hand, I, the Lord your God, and I say to you, don't be afraid, I'm here to help you. 1 Corinthians 16:13 and 14. Be on guard. Stand firm in the faith. Be courageous. Be strong. And do everything with love. Luke 1:37. For nothing is impossible with God. Chapter 12. A sprout springs forth. The next morning, my mom was sitting on the edge of my bed. When she saw my eyes open, she whispered to me that Jem had called this morning on the telephone. Mom thought that I should call her. After Mom left the room, I laid there staring at the painting of the oak tree. I remembered how trees grew. The secret was in the seed. Yep, it's true. A tree's whole life story is stored in a tiny seed. The seed is planted in soil. Rain falls on it and the sun warms it. The seed sends down roots that act like drinking straws. The roots suck the water up. Next, a sprout springs forth out of the soil. The little tree sprout is called a seedling. Finally, the tree begins to grow bigger, and it's called a sapling. That's an amazing thought. I like that thought a lot, that something so small could become so great. It reminded me of what Gramps says, that God uses little people to do great big things. Maybe we were more like tree seeds than we thought. I sat at the kitchen table. I tried to eat a bowl of healthy O's for extra strength, but after tasting them, I decided that my genes would have to be strong enough. I knew that I needed to apologize to Jem. I returned her phone call. We agreed to meet at the tree. When Jem ducked under the tree, she didn't say anything, and I didn't either for a long time. Jem, I'm sorry that I ran away. I didn't know what to do. I finally spoke. I told Jem that I felt scared and mad. I told her how I didn't want to let Adele under the tree because I didn't know if I could be a friend to her. I explained to Jem that I was afraid that Adele would become her best friend. Then I would truly feel like a lone oak tree. I couldn't understand why Adele teased me or how she even knew my name. As if she heard us talking about her under the tree, Adele came riding up and parked her bike alongside the fence. She held out her baseball hat. Pickles the frog was inside her hat. She covered the hat with her hands so that Pickles wouldn't jump out. She wanted to show us that Pickles was safe and that she wouldn't hurt her. She said that she watched Pickles eat 2 flies by the pond after I left yesterday. She leaned over the fence under the pine branches so that we could see her better. Then Adele said, "Wait, there's something else I have for you two." Adele asked if we would hold Pickles for a moment. Jem and I reached quickly for Pickles and put her in the bug box under the tree. I was relieved that she was safe again. Adele held out 2 whole packs of that bubble gum. "There's 1 pack for each of you," she said. She motioned for us to take the packs of gum. Jem and I looked at each other, amazed that we were holding that incredible gum, the gum that made those huge bubbles. Now that I was holding it in my hand, I didn't know what to do with it. We thanked her excitedly. Adele said she had something she wanted to tell me. Jem and I looked at each other more seriously. Adele lowered her chin. In fact, all I could see was the turtle pin in her hair. She kicked sand with her shoe back and forth like baseball players do at home plate. I could tell it was something she was nervous about because she was twitchy, like I get when I'm nervous about something too. I hoped she would say it soon. I had an idea what she was going to say, and I wanted to tell her that it was okay. I wanted to tell her to forget about it, but it was too late. She stopped kicking dirt, got real still, and said what I had hoped she would say. "I'm sorry," Adele said. I wanted to say, "What?" because I would have liked to have heard that a second time, but I looked at Jem instead. Jem smiled. I came out from under the tree. Adele lifted her head and she looked at me. Her eyes looked like 2 beautiful blue robin eggs. I knew if she blinked, those eggs might have cracked. So I hugged her. She didn't hug me back, but that's okay. I could feel my grandma's strength, my name's strength, and God's strength wrap around me. Besides, Jem was right. Adele did seem sad. I knew I could do this. "Adele, would you like to come under this tree with us?" I asked. She nodded yes, and I led Adele under our tree. Her voice sounded soft and different as she said, You know, being new doesn't feel as exciting as my dad said it would feel. Being new feels scary and lonely. She explained how she had to be new at everything because everything around her was new. She lived in a new house, would go to a new school, had new neighbors, and had to play on a new baseball team. She said that when she saw me under the tree, I didn't seem new at all. Adele said she thought I had lived here a long time. She explained that she wanted to be like that too, all worn in like an old baseball glove. I nodded because I knew what an old glove felt like, and it felt good. There was a pause, and then Adele said she wished she had a friend. Just then I heard the tinkling of glasses behind us and a faint voice say, "Well, I thought I might find you all here." It was Mrs. Grover, with 4 glasses of lemonade. She asked if she could please duck under the tree with us. We all looked at each other in surprise. We didn't know what to say. Mrs. Grover had never asked to come under the tree with us. Jem spoke up and cheerfully said, "Sure." Mrs. Grover passed out the lemonade to each of us and asked us to sit down on the dirt beside her under the tree. She wiped her brow and took a long drink of lemonade. She commented on how cool the temperature was under the tree and told us how she could see why we loved being under it. She told us about the day she and her husband had moved here. She looked up at the tree through its branches and commented how the tree was much smaller back then. "Oh, how things grow. I don't know why I'm surprised. All things grow with love," Mrs. Grover said with a wink. Looking directly at Jem and me, Mrs. Grover said, "I'm glad to see you girls have met my friend Adele. I told Adele about you two and how much you two enjoy playing under this tree." Jem and I looked at each other in surprise. Adele gulped down her lemonade. "Adele is quite a ball player. She plays on the ball team up at the park. I bet she'd love to hear all about your grandmother's team, huh, Oaken? Perhaps she's already heard all about it." "Yes, I figured she would have a lot in common with you," Mrs. Grover mentioned. Then Mrs. Grover stood and added, "Well, I suppose I've sat here long enough. The laundry isn't going to dry itself if it doesn't show itself to the sun and the wind. Thank you for inviting me under God's tree. Lemonade always tastes sweeter when shared with friends." She finished the last sip of lemonade in her glass. Before Mrs. Grover ducked under the tree to leave, I offered to help carry the glasses back into the house for her. We thanked Mrs. Grover, and I followed behind her with a tray of empty glasses. I set the tray on the kitchen table where Mrs. Grover told me to, and as I turned to go back out, Mrs. Grover spoke again. "Oaken, people aren't always as they seem." She paused. "You, however, you are everything you seem to be." She asked if I would wait a moment. She left the kitchen and returned with a bright orange pot with purple polka dots on it. It had a silver nameplate on the pot that read Oaken in bold letters. She handed it to me and told me it reminded her of me. I smiled at the beautiful life planted in it and knew exactly the kind of tree it was. I had so much joy in my heart that I thought I might burst. I set the oak tree down on the table for a moment and leapt into Mrs. Grover's arms. I thanked her again, only this time for seeing me for what I had always wanted to be, a strong oak tree. Jem, Eddie, and I lay under the pine tree and shared all kinds of stories about bubble gum, tennis shoes, bike riding, baseball, and dirt. As it turned out, Eddie knew a lot about frogs, and we knew her backyard would make a great place for Pickles to live. We even told Eddie about the pickle pine potion. I told her that I was sorry that I had wanted to cast a spell on her. We told Eddie about Jem's dream to find a stray dog. Then Jem asked Eddie about the stray dog that we met in the alley that day. Jem was pleased when Eddie didn't know who the dog belonged to. Eddie said she saw the dog at the ball field sometimes. I turned my head to look over at Jem. She looked up into the branches of the tree and began whistling. This is what Jem did when she was happy, and everything seemed good. Laying there under the tree, I noticed feet crossing the alley. They were Mom's feet. I bet she was coming to bring lunch for us. We sure had a lot of visitors today. Mom ducked under the tree carrying sandwiches, and we all sat up. "Well, who's your new friend?" Mom asked. "Oh, Mom, this is Eddie. She lives just down the alley. Eddie, this is my mom, I politely introduced her. Eddie is a wonderful name. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mom said, smiling. Isn't it a coincidence that I happen to make 3 PB&J sandwiches? I knew Mom had really made one for herself, but when she saw 3 of us, she gave her sandwich to Eddie. Mom handed a sandwich to each of us, and as she did, she said, pickles, bread, and jam. Huh? Eddie questioned, looking down at her sandwich. She inspected the odd ingredients inside with surprise. Jem and I laughed out loud with a mouthful of PB&J. Mom stood to leave. I touched Mom's hand, and I told her the sandwiches were the best. Then I told Mom that God gave her all the right ingredients. Mom tilted her head, smiled at me, and said, thanks, Oaken. Genesis 2:9. The Lord God made all sorts of trees grow up from trees that were beautiful and that produced delicious fruit. In the middle of the garden, he placed the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Isaiah 61:3. To all who mourn in Israel, he will give a crown of beauty for ashes, a joyous blessing instead of mourning, festive praise instead of despair. In their righteousness, they will be like great oaks that the Lord has planted for his own glory. Epilogue. I finally knew what it was. It was friendship. I remembered asking my family what friendship was at the dinner the night we celebrated my grandparents' anniversary. I remembered Mom. She said that it was like playing catch. She said it worked because both people were doing their part. She was right. 2 people have to want to be friends in order to have friendship. I liked Dad's idea that friendship was like the relationship between honeybees and pollination, a beautiful and necessary thing. Undoubtedly, I needed Jem. By the way, did you know that bees pollinate 1/3 of all the food we eat? After Mom explained the elastic comfort in a pair of underwear, I understood what Gramps meant when he said friendship gives, like boxer shorts. That makes me laugh. However, there was one person I didn't agree with, my brother Robbie. He said that I'd never know what friendship was. I smiled because I did know what friendship was, and I'd make sure to tell Robbie that he was wrong. When I asked God if he would show me what friendship was, I knew he would, and he did. He showed me Jem. Dear God, thank you for showing me Jem. When you showed me Jem, you also showed me you. I bet you were trying to show me all along, weren't you? God, I love you first, and I love you most. Also, thanks for nature, trees and dirt. I just really dig those things. Amen. P.S. God, I really do love my brother Robbie, but let's keep that between us. Psalm 96:11-12. Let the heavens be glad and the earth rejoice. Let the sea and everything in it shout his praise. Let the field and their crops burst out with joy. Let the trees of the forest rustle with praise. Philippians 4:4. Always be full of joy in the Lord. I say it again, rejoice. The end.